My name is Norbert Blei, and I'm a writer. Been living here since 1969, came from Chicago. I wrote fiction and nonfiction. I came to the county with the idea of leaving all that behind me, although I had to exist via Chicago for at least 10 years by driving back and forth and doing stories and continuing to freelance. But really to focus then more on books was the reason I came here. This was a nice, quiet place to work. I had to then slowly adjust to life here and my whole life as a writer. I have a voice and an attitude and an appreciation of people that causes them to open up almost immediately and talk. If you can get people to trust you, and either they see that immediately or they don't, and if they do, they'll tell you more than you want to know. When I would do a profile of a person, I would always try to not just talk about the person, but tell a story about him. Tell a story about my coming to meet him or whatever. You want this thing to say something. Make this life exhibit some sense of meaning, you know. I really try to take word for word what a person said. I don't fashion any of the conversation. I don't edit. Whatever was down there is a revelation of who that person was. As I began to write about the place, my attraction then was to get as close to the person who was still farming, the person who still had an orchard. I think the first one was my next door neighbor, Charlie Root, who was in his 80s at that time and had, I think, only left the county once in his entire life. But he became my really close friend. And then the Carlsons across the road, and I always call him Pa, and he in fact worked on this place. He cut all the lumber for this coop of mine where I'm in now. But Pa Carlson and Charlie, these were some of the first people. And Charlie would be the epitome of the old-timer, rough life, just eking a living out on a small piece of land. After I had maybe 5 or 6, I began scoping the county itself, thinking, who are the women that would be interesting? Women who might represent a real sense of independence. Chick Peterson, that I got to know, and he became a very good friend of mine and has done all the covers on my books and many illustrations as well. Al Johnson. How could you do a story about business in this county without centering maybe that story about him and what he was able to build there? The work then became an accumulation of these stories into a book, an expression of these people and why they were here, what they were doing here, and the kind of lives that they led. When we come in here, writers, artists, photographers, and we see the county through different eyes. Does the local see what we see, you know, or are they just so enmeshed in what their life is that they're oblivious to all this? I can almost hear the quiet. At times I think I live in a poem. Early walks toward the lake at the end of the road find me merging into solemn woods, into fields on fire in morning light, drifting toward shimmering lake water, waiting in repose for my approach. I have been trying to define this place for more than 40 years, my adopted landscape. I came to believe this peninsula was all about light 10 years after I settled in 1969, and continue to study my new setting since then in notes, essays, and books, trying to acclimate myself to a rural culture utterly foreign to me. I walked the immediate area around my old farmhouse, those first years, always a stranger in my own domain. What is this? Is this home? The writer at large, attempting to settle in once again, acquainting himself with the nearby fields, the woods, the stone fences, the inland waters, Lake Michigan and Green Bay shoreline. I drove the back roads north and south, up and down the peninsula, crisscrossed it in all kinds of weather and all seasons, and I never tired of all it offered. 40 years later, I remain in place, though looking at everything from different angles. There is something about this peninsula I still need to know. The land is always telling me something, and I am trying hard to concentrate, to listen, to get it right. Reading the landscape at the beginning was a new and very different book to comprehend, to learn, to translate in one's own words.